Time to call the meeting to order. Start with a prayer and a pledge. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here today on such a wonderful evening. Help us to do your will and work for the residents of this town. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell.
Here.
Mr. Bronner.
Here.
Mr. Bishop.
Here.
Mr. Boehner.
Here.
Mr. Tommen.
Here.
Mrs. Kroger.
Here.
Mrs. Edichico. Here.
7 present. We have quorum for business and for legislation. Special presentation. Is that you?
Oh, are we ready?
Yeah.
It's right here.
Well, there we go. Well, hey, tonight we're very honored as a city, to recognize an incredible family and their incredible business that's now been a part of Reading for 75 years. We have Bill Kramer here. I think Bill's grandpa started the business in Reading in 1947. My dad was a senior that year. But anyway, 75 years later, they're doing a lot of right things. I read years ago, a lot of businesses don't make it but a couple years, and 75 years later, going strong. And Bill, you and your wonderful family and the business you formed, doing very special things too. It says here, General Tool Company is one of the leading precision metalworking manufacturing firms in the Midwest. This third-generation family-owned company continues to earn its reputation every day by supplying mission-critical systems to the world's leading defense and aerospace companies. And I know General Tool makes things that go on to aircraft carriers that are incredible, and other ships and other wonderful things. I know for me, it's been an honor to work with General Tool. About 20 years ago, I got to meet Bill's dad, a very respectful, just wonderful man he is. And working with Bill and these last 20 years, business roundtables, they contribute to our community, do a lot of wonderful things, and a blessing to our community, Bill. And Linda, you got to say a few words here too. And
I have a couple things to say. We talk about the significant contribution that General Tool makes to our tax and employment base, with about 278 jobs, and their floor plan is 275,000 square feet. And I have been was honored to work with Bill and his father as that floor plan expanded again, and expanded again. And during that time, I have to say I've been in this business for 40-some years, and I've worked in many, many communities. And the Kramers, both Bill and his father, they are at the top of my list of just amazing businesses and business people, and they do it the right way. Only other thing I have to add is we talk about that expansion of our tax base that they bring, but there's some other things that they bring to this community. They are always willing to give a helping hand, and that might include me giving Bill a call, running something by him, and he'll set me straight and say, well, Linda, I think you need to look at it this way too. So there's that, but then he serves on our Reading Business Roundtable, our top 10 CEOs, and it is rare for him not to be there. Then he also spent hours and hours working on our comprehensive plan that we established in 2019. And very busy man, but he found time to spend hours upon hours to develop a plan that's being used as a guide for the future growth and development of our city. And last thing is, even the Reading Bridal District has benefited from the generosity of the Kramer family. The love mural that you see at the entryway, Bill and his family had made a significant contribution to that. So I thank him for his taxes, but I thank him for his friendship as well.
Thank you.
Now it's your turn.
Before you say something, can I say something real quick, Bill?
Please.
I mean, everybody here is Reading natives. You know, I don't know if you were like me, and I was just talking to Brenda about this. You know, tired growing up, you go down Reading Road and you hear General Tool Company. And I think of a tool company, like you're building hammers and screwdrivers. You know, I mean, in my brain, you know, that's what you're thinking. And then when I got to work here, and one of the first roundtable meetings was at General Tool, and they did a big tour through the whole place, and I was just blown away. Not just I mean, you have things that are, I mean, I couldn't tell you how heavy. I mean, you could tell me how many.
98,000 pounds.
How many did you say?
98,000 pounds.
98,000 pounds.
How big one of the
And-
generator sets are.
But then they're also doing things that are so specialized that, you know, those parts are going into, you know, stuff that are on our aircraft carriers. And it's just, to me, I was like, wow, I mean, how lucky we are in Reading that they're located here. So, you know, I just wanted to add that in, you know, as a native Reading person who never knew what General Tool Company was. But, you know, I tell people all the time, it's awesome that we have it here. And I didn't realize until earlier this year that it was 75 years, so congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Not the most imaginative name, right, General Tool Company. But, you know, I'm so blessed, the family, the business, to have had a partnership like we've had for so many years with Reading. We started out in a building that was 70 feet by 100 feet with maybe a dozen people. And I'm certain over the 75 years that we've had a great deal of assistance from Reading, from the mayor, from council, from Linda. I really can't say enough good things about the people I've had a chance to work with here in the city. And, you know, it's just a blessing. I appreciate all the kind words, and I look forward to at least 25 more years in Reading. You know, the old joke is that first generation creates the business, the second generation grows the business, and the third generation throws the business away. So my brother and I are trying really hard not to let that happen. So thank you all for the kind words. We have enjoyed being here as much as I think Reading has enjoyed having us. So it's been a great relationship. Thank you all very much.
And Bill, before you go, nice plaque, and you know you have Linda to thank for this,
Why
but
don't you come out here?
we'll come out there and do this.
Yeah. that's fine. You want to get in the middle with all council and everything?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Stand up.
Maybe right here where the
You guys want-
empty spot is.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll sit.
Yeah.
Don't
be in our lobby.
Everybody hit till 45.
tall ones in
Get
back.
more people in.
Yeah, I will. Ready? One picture here.
What about bunny rabbit ears?
The bombers.
Thanks again, Doug. Thank you for all your. Thank you, Bill. Have a great evening. I will.
That's supposed to be the welder's plane.
Beautiful. And the logo turned out great.
Teamwork there.
Okay, with the festivities now over, approval of minutes from the November 1 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Oh, I'm going to give it to Mr. Tomlin on this one. Motion to approve by Mrs. Edichico, second by Mr. Tomlin. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I think that carries by voice vote. Did that not work in the other outlet there?
I say, I'm not touching mine.
Did that work?
All right. Is there a spot to plug that in next to where Mr. Bishop's is?
No, this one's taped up,
Can you string it out a little farther?
tape over.
There's
He's got two
porch
of
down
All right,
here.
that's fine. All right, good enough. Audience asking participation. Looks like we have Mr. Bob Ashbrook. You know the drill, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Council. My name is Bob Ashbrook, 221 Walnut Street, Reading, Ohio. I come here this evening to speak to Council on two specific items. Item number one would be an update on the COVID funds. I know that about 4 or 5 months ago, Councilman Boehner made an inquiry about essentially what funds were received and how they've been dispersed and so on. I think that it is a matter of great importance. There was a significant amount of additional revenue, I think, came the city's way. Initially, those funds were intended to replace lost revenue. It's my understanding that Reading received funds that exceeded our loss of revenue, so it's sort of found money. Those funds, when they were released, initially came with guidelines from the federal government in terms of how they should be spent. One of the recommended uses for them was eliminating lead service lines as a public health concern. And I know that within the city of Reading, there are a number of properties that are still served by such lines. So I think that a thorough explanation about what funds have been received and so on, how they might intend to be spent, would be of great public benefit. The second item that I'd speak to you about this evening is a proposed elimination of a prohibition for marijuana cultivators, processors, and dispensaries in the city of Reading. Councilwoman Edichico raised this issue several weeks ago. I would urge great caution for council in proceeding with that matter. In 2016, there was a moratorium enacted by council to ensure that proper regulations could be developed within the city of Reading to ensure that any such business that might locate here would be not a public nuisance. That moratorium was extended again in May. And finally, after multiple readings and thorough public input, the community decided to prohibit those types of activities in the community in August of 2017. I think that was very much in keeping with the urging of the law director. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dave, but I'm fairly certain that my recollection is accurate, that you were in favor of the prohibition.
That's correct, Bob.
Right, okay. So one of the great concerns that I would have in terms of timing proceeding on this is the fact that the current zoning code does not define any of those activities as a use. So if the prohibition were merely lifted without alterations to the zoning code text, it's my opinion that a would-be operator could immediately make application, and it would then be the duty of the zoning administrator to determine or interpret the code and assign to the would-be use a classification that it is similar to. For example, the dispensaries, in my view, would be most like a retail store. It's very much like a drugstore, absent any specific definition to the contrary. So that would enable a dispensary to be located virtually anywhere in Reading that is owned business A, B, C, D, or in any of the overlay districts. The processors would probably be thought of as light industry, and the cultivators would probably be viewed as operating as a greenhouse or nursery. Greenhouses and nurseries are permitted in business C, D, and light industry. So again, I think the matter requires significant review before any impulsive action is taken, and I would urge council to do just that. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Ashbrook, I think that your points are well taken, and a lot of those points have been subject to discussion among Ms. Edichico's committee, and in fact, between conversations between me and her with respect to that. The proposals that are on the floor at this point are to change the definitional sections in the zoning code to include dispensaries only. and also to put them into light industrial as an accessory use. That's what the current legislation that Ms. Edichico's committee is proposing. The prohibition would be lifted only as to the dispensaries and not as to the processors or the cultivators. If this legislation were to pass, I think that your observations with respect to a simple lifting of the prohibition against dispensaries are correct. And we've had some discussions about that as well, that they would be permitted in the general business districts as a retail use. The only other thing that I saw was that they could possibly fit under the light industrial as a conditionally permitted use under the medical facilities that they have in there as well. So I think your observations are well taken, and I just wanted to let you know that those discussions have been had and the legislation is in line with that. You indicated that I was in favor of the prohibition in 2017, and that's correct, and I am, frankly, I'm still in favor of it. As you know, my job is to make sure that council can do what council wants to do, and in that, as part of that job, I assisted Ms. Edichico in making sure that these things were drafted correctly. I've got a couple ordinances that I'm doing, one for Bob and one for Andy as well. So,
If I may, once again, add a little to what I have said so far. The dispensaries nationwide have an average square footage of 4,000 square feet. And I think that what has been described as the potential site for this dispensary, if it were in a light industrial area, would seem to me that you'd be putting in a facility that would greatly underutilize the acreage that they would otherwise have. And
I don't disagree with that observation either.
Right. And then the final remark would be that I think most of us are aware of the fact that there is no city water on Hill Street, and I think that's one of the locations that's under consideration. I think there is a possibility of Cincinnati water being fed from the Knollcrest side, but the lack of...
Bob, I hate to do it, I gotta cut you off though.
That's fine, I've made my point.
We're out of time, but if anybody wants to hear, you can extend his time.
Can I follow up just a little bit on that?
Go ahead, yeah.
The other thing that I think people need to understand is that even if these ordinances were passed, somebody would have to apply and get a license through the state of Ohio, and there are significant restrictions under Chapter 3796 on how that happens. Currently, there's 58 dispensaries in this area. There's 11 in Hamilton County alone, but in Southwest Ohio, there's like 58, so.
And just one quick note, in the legislation, we do have that we are limiting the dispensaries to only one within the city to prevent the pop-up shops and other businesses and to keep some form of control on that. And I do have some more notes to read, but I'm gonna do that after all the communications are read, so.
Okay, are you gonna, we don't have any reports tonight. We want to include that in miscellaneous business?
Yes.
Right. All right, moving on. Any others from the audience? Nope. We only have two here. And all right. Okay. Next up, reading of communications, and there's a ton.
Yes, there are. First one is an email from Don Likens regarding police understaffing. It does say, "Hi, Chief Edens, Patrick Ross, council members, mayor. According to this FBI report, see link below, our RPD is significantly understaffed, which is probably leading to our increased crime and lack of felonies being solved. Simply put, we need more officers and detectives. If RPD were staffed as Laughlin, we should have 48 officers, not 24. I ran the numbers in a spreadsheet from the FBI site. See the link to report from 2017, 5 years ago, but the only data available from FBI and attached spreadsheet where I sorted by other cities, and that was distributed to everyone." All right, number 2. This is an email from Judy back, I think it's Gerwe, regarding proposed marijuana dispensary on Hill Street. It says, I understand there's a Reading City Council meeting tomorrow night. Oh, that's my note, sorry. It has come to our attention that the city is considering the approval of a marijuana dispensary on the Hill Street site. We request that the city consider the proximity of this dispensary to the schools in the city, including Mount Notre Dame, and to determine an appropriate distance that a dispensary should be from a school building. It seems that this may not be the best location for a dispensary in the city. We appreciate your consideration. Judy Gerwe, President of Mount Notre Dame.
I do have a comment on that. This afternoon, I took a little time and looked at that very issue. And as the crow flies, it's 2,300 feet more or less, property corner to property corner, from the Mount Notre Dame property to the property that is being asked for. More importantly, driving distance. Driving, it's approximately 1.6 miles from the access off of Knollcrest as described to the schools. So those are the two, that's like an as-driven distance.
And what is the technical limit?
There's an Ohio prohibition of 500 feet within school premises. There's also a similar prohibition for churches and other types of businesses.
Very good.
I got a comment, real quick. There was 2 other emails we all got from Mr. Frankel and also Mr. Sauerbraum, I believe his name was. Could those be included in the record as well?
Yep, I'm not done.
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
I'll have to get those to you. I'll get those to you.
Okay. All right. The next one is email from Ms. Linda Fitzgerald regarding analysis of proposed use for Hill Street property. This was a memo from her addressed to Mr. Bo Bemis, the mayor, dated November 11th, 2022. You asked that I evaluate the proposal for a dispensary on 10.3 acres of the 38-acre Hill Street property from an economic development perspective. Based on my limited knowledge of the proposed use development, here are my preliminary observations. Number 1, the proposed use may not be consistent with the city's 2019 comprehensive plan and/or proposed zoning code updates. The City of Reading July 2019 comprehensive plan indicates that the highest and best use of the 38-acre Hill Street property is residential and office commercial, page 61. The plan recommends that a Planned Development District, PDD, overlay be applied to the property that reserves some areas accessible, visible from freeway and adjacent to industrial and future tech labs as office commercial to be developed with residential and office commercial. Capitalizes on views and more challenging terrains, less accessible parts of the site to be provided to provide new single-family housing. Page 61 of the plan provides a schematic drawing of a potential development concept that incorporates mixed-use residential and office uses on the 38-acre site. In 2019, the city received a grant from the Hamilton County to update the city's zoning code. In the draft code, approved by Planning Commission and referred to City Council, the recommendation is to rezone the Hill Street property from residential and light industry to a planned district development, PDD, designation. Furthermore, the zoning update stipulates that the regulations regarding that PDD would follow the recommendations for the Hill Street property in the comprehensive plan. Number 2, the proposed use may adversely affect development opportunities for the remainder of the site. A development that does not include a plan for the entire 39 acres could result in limiting opportunities for future development of the remainder of the site. This is especially true if the proposed use threatens the viability of other uses on the site, which may be very lucrative from a revenue enhancement perspective and are consistent with the master plan. Number 3, the tax and employment benefits of the proposed use are unclear. To evaluate the economic development benefits to the city from any proposed use for the Hill Street site requires submission of viable tax and employment projections and a detailed development plan for the specific 10.3 acres, as well as a general concept plan for the remaining 28 acres. To date, I have not received any information of this nature. Bo, I would be happy to meet with the developers of this project to brief them on the background of the site and to review any plans or pro formas they have.
Brief comment on that. One thing in here that was mentioned was approved by planning commission and referred to city council. It's my recollection that it was initially approved by planning commission, then it was actually sent to my committee. We were having meetings, but then there was an issue with improper notice of the planning commission meeting. So the initial approval of it was voided, and it was to go back to planning commission. We have not received any confirmation back from them that they have met and approved it.
Thank you, David.
So.
Patrick did clarify that.
Okay.
Okay, the next communication is an email from Ed Frankel citing opposition to the proposed medical marijuana dispensary. This is dated November 15th, 2022. This letter is being sent to inform you, Mayor Bemis, and the members of the Reading City Council that Standard Textile is vehemently. Thank you. I'm tired, guys. Vehemently opposed to the proposed resolution and ordinances which would allow for the location of a medical marijuana dispensary in Reading, and more particularly in one of the city's light industrial districts. Specifically, the proposed usage on Hill Street is inconsistent with the 2019 comprehensive plan adopted by the city. I personally served on the Reading Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee and was honored to do so. Deviation from the comprehensive plan should only occur after careful consideration of all the ramifications of such a deviation. In this case, approval of a usage which is not the highest and best use of the property as contemplated by the comprehensive plan is not in the best interests of either the city or the nearby property owners who are using their property for office and commercial usage. From the city's perspective, the lack of a plan for the entire Hill Street property site will likely impair the development of the balance of the property, which is not being used for the proposed dispensary. In a similar manner, inasmuch as the current proposed usage would allow for location of a dispensary, which is in the immediate vicinity of Standard Textile's world headquarters, there is a potential for a detrimental impact on the value of the property utilized by Standard Textile and on surrounding property. This inappropriate proposed usage may impact the continued viability of the location for Standard Textile, which has been in our Knoll Crest Drive location for approximately 60 years, and which has supported the city with earnings tax revenue from Standard Textile employees located in the city. The current economic environment is not one where proposed development should create the possibility of driving out established commercial property users, which have helped to provide the city with a strong economic base. Sincerely, Edward M. Frankel, Senior Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer of Standard Textile.
And I'd like to make a motion to include the communication that was received just before the meeting from Chris Fox.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mrs. Edichico and a second by Mr. Powell to insert a communication from Chris Fox. Is that correct?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Please continue.
Okay. So to start, this is one of the highest monitored business within the state and country. Any materials that are grown, transported, received, or sold are intricately monitored by the Ohio Board of Pharmacy from initial planting to eventual sale. For the dispensary we are discussing, we simply receive product from the cultivators that is rigorously tested and measured for a variety of safety reasons. As all cannabis sales are strictly for medical purposes currently, the control methods for a product is treated similarly to a pharmacy that distributes controlled substances. The Board of Pharmacy has access to all of our point-of-sale systems to track any incoming and outgoing product, including wholesale purchasing from cultivators and sales to individuals at the store level. We were required to meet very specific security practices, including having an approved safe room for storage of product and cash sales, constantly having a security guard on site during all operating hours, requiring video and alarm monitoring on all entrances and exits, which the BOP has access to at any point in time, and scanning all of the medical cards and IDs before any access is allowed to the retail element of the storefront. The BOP has an extremely strict no leniency policy in place for all rules and regulations that have put into place, and will not hesitate to ever suspend or revoke our license should any of those practices or procedures are not followed correctly on a daily basis. A list of all guidelines and regulations can be found through a variety of documents at this link. It is https:// medical marijuana, medicalmarijuana.ohio, ohio.gov/dispensaries, DISPENSARIES. As for the tax equation, until recreational cannabis is passed, the specific designation of tax revenue is the same as all standard sales tax via the city and state. With the passing of recreational sales, it is likely that the state would designate any additional tax on products sold up to 15% to be designated to specific industries that have not yet been listed. As I mentioned previously and spoke about in more detail with Patrick Ross, we would love to set aside at least 2% of our overall profit to designate towards the local school system and the Parks and Recreation Department. We are estimating sales of between 5 to 7 million in year one, which would equate to roughly 100 to 140K in funds donated to those departments in the same year. We naturally would also be willing to donate additional funds to certain initiatives at your recommendation, should it be brought to our attention. I know this is all a lot of information to process in a small amount of time, but I'm obviously happy to help provide follow-up details on any of the information mentioned above, as some of these details can get quite complex. Cheers, Chris Fox, owner-operator of the Wildfire Corporation.
I have some comments to make, just real quick, since we had a lot of communications about that. First, I would like to emphasize that tonight is just the first reading on the resolution and ordinances. This is not anything that we are jumping into. We have been discussing this for a while and gone into a lot of detail. I've done a lot of research and Googling and reading as much about this as I possibly can. That said, I would like to schedule a Laws and Contracts Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 29th at 6:30 to further discuss this issue. I appreciate all the public input, and I do understand all the concerns as well. The legislation is only proposing amending part of the moratorium regarding dispensaries and has no involvement in the sale of the Hill Street property. That said, I think it would be worth looking at another possible location within the city. I would like to discuss that as well as the public input and concerns with my committee during our meeting, and I'll have more during miscellaneous business.
Very good.
I make a motion that we receive and file all communications.
Second.
We have a motion to receive and file all communications. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Would I be allowed a few comments on it as well?
Go ahead.
You know, again, I think we've gone way too far with this, with not enough knowledge from a city point of view. I think it was brought up again by Ed Frankel. Standard Textile is a major employer. I think 340 employees, having worked on a master plan, and pointed out some simple things. We do not know, we haven't studied how this might impact future development on Hill Street. A major area in our city that could be developed someday. We haven't researched other neighboring businesses, other than Standard Textile, nor neighboring residents, who might, again, work with the city on plans that would bring some good revenues to the city in the future. So I think these were points that were established here tonight that we all need to pay attention to and move forward with caution. And, even if it's going to be proposed for another place, I suggest, again, that we go to our economic development consultant, let her vet the business, see what their intentions are. Linda, there's very few areas of the city, if any at all, that she isn't intimately familiar with, with prospects in the past and deals we've gone through and proposals we've gone through. So anything moving forward, I think, should start with Linda and again, research of what neighboring businesses and residents and others think. So that's
While we're at it, I'll add my own 2 cents from a council business standpoint. You can go past 3 readings if you need to, as many as it takes. So it can sit and languish for the remainder of the session, depending on what you want to do, just saying. All right. Moving on, guest speakers. Do we have any? I don't think we do. None are scheduled. All right. Next one, executive session to discuss threatened litigation is on the schedule. Do we have a motion to go to that executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Kroger, second by Mr. Powell to go to executive session.
Specifically
To discuss threatened litigation. Do we need a
Roll call.
roll call vote? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Bronner,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Boehner,
Yes.
Mr. Tommen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
All right, we're in executive session. I guess we'll go that way.
8:06.
Thank you.
Make a motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Well, that was, so Mrs. Edichico makes the motion, and Mrs. Kroger seconds the motion to adjourn from executive session. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned from executive session. It's 8:29. All right, moving on to the next item, reading of resolutions. And Mrs. Edichico, you're saying just let them roll, just let them run?
Yeah, first reading.
First readings only, okay.
That's on the dispensaries. There's another resolution there also.
Oh, that's right. All right,
Second reading for resolution approving the Reading Road Corridor Plan.
Make a motion that we waive the rule requiring a third reading.
Second.
we have a motion by Mr. Powell and a second by Mr. Bronner to waive the rule requiring the third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
No.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
All right, third reading is waived.
I'll make a motion to approve,
You mean adopt?
adopt.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Edichico and a second by Mr. Powell to adopt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
No.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
6 yes. Resolution number?
2020-34R.
2020?
2022, I apologize.
That's all right, we did lose two years there. All right, 2022 dash what?
34R.
34R. I forgot to announce it was 6-1 on the vote to waive the third reading.
And first reading for this resolution, a resolution proposing amendments to the zoning code of the City of Reading as codified in chapters 1242 and 1270 of the Reading Code of Ordinances to provide for the establishment and location of medical marijuana retail dispensaries and transmitting same to the Planning Commission of the City of Reading for its review and consideration.
Okay, that's the first reading, right?
Yes.
Moving on, reading of ordinances.
Okay. An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase audio-visual equipment for council chambers and declaring an emergency.
Discussion on that?
Just to say that the reason the emergency is declared is to purchase and install as soon as possible.
We have to have it by Jan 1st, correct?
Yes. I will make a motion to suspend the second and third
So-
reading.
Anybody want to comment on where the funding's coming from? Because we have an ordinance from 2019 that relates to upgrading council chambers that provides a fund account for that.
The sewer service fee fund?
Sewer service fee fund is it?
That was gonna be my question. I'm sorry, I was looking at something else here. My question is, Bo, do you know why we're taking out a sewer service fee fund, or?
We can. It's,
Well, I mean, that's what's in the ordinance. I didn't know why.
yeah,
And to speak back to,
there's plenty of money there.
I would think that would come out of 340 capital fund is what I thought it would come from.
You know something? I think that there's probably more money available. Sewer service fee would be my opinion there, so.
Would Sabrina have a preference for accounting purposes in any way, or?
That I don't know.
Right.
Mr.
When we
Powell,
approved the picnic tables, it came out of here as well. Sabrina and Patrick said there was no need to do a transfer. It was just as easy to go from there.
in 2019, when that was passed originally, we were talking about maybe replacing carpeting and that kind of stuff. I think maybe some AV stuff was mentioned. I believe the kind of the driving force of this quotation now is actually fire department, because they utilize up here for training, and I imagine other city departments would utilize this for training as well.
Okay. Is everybody good without reads?
Yeah, that's fine.
Very good. So, Mrs. Edichico, would you please repeat your,
I'll make a motion
Motion.
to suspend the second and third reading.
Second.
oh man, that was tough. I think it was Mr. Boehner.
It was Mr. Bishop.
Was it? Oh, all right, sorry. So motion by Mrs. Edichico, second by Mr. Bishop to suspend the second and third readings. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
7 yes. The rule is suspended.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt
Second.
by Mrs. Edichico and second by Mrs. Kroger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
7 yes. Ordinance number
2022-35. An ordinance amending ordinance 2017-53, section 624.24 of the City of Reading Code of Ordinances to permit retail dispensaries of medical marijuana.
And this is a first reading.
An ordinance amending the zoning code of the City of Reading as codified in chapters 1242 and 1270 of the Reading Code of Ordinances to provide for the establishment and location of medical marijuana dispensaries.
Also a first reading.
Thank you, that makes it easier for me.
Okay, an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to execute an amended water service agreement with the City of Cincinnati on behalf of the Greater Cincinnati Water Works and declaring an emergency.
Is there discussion on this?
Yes, I do have some discussion. Reading through that agreement with them, one thing that was a little troubling, and I can't really put my finger on it right now, but there was some kind of a provision in the contract that if basically in a time of emergency, that the City of Cincinnati, if they don't have surplus water, that we would effectively be cut off. It's troubling to me that, yeah, they did say that they would do what they could to help us out, but that's something that was a, you know, kind of a real hang-up for me, because potable water is so critical. Also, the 25-year span of this, that makes me a little nervous as well. That's a long time. That was really my only comments on it.
Is that
So
the,
I think it was a 50-year agreement for this one. I think communities like consistency and reliability. Now, there were several years where we just added a year on at a time, but I think it's worked out very, very well for all of us.
It's, you know, just especially lately with what has gone on with the Mississippi River, and God forbid the Ohio River ever got to that, you know, we'd be in a world of hurt. So now, yeah, I don't know that realistically we have many other options, though.
Well,
At this point, by the end of the year, unfortunately.
Well, you know, the bottom line on it is, if I can comment, I know this is council's meeting, but
Oh, absolutely, Dave.
we went through a a series of a pretty significant litigation back in the early 1990s that resulted in our well fields being closed. We had a period of 5 years where we were allowed to use a pack tower aerator, and that extended into my service as the law director. At the time that we were looking to try and extend the use of our wells for an additional period of time, the EPA came back and said no. And realistically, the only available option for us to get potable water to our citizens is the city of Cincinnati, Greater Cincinnati Waterworks. If the emergency clause that you're referring to is pretty standard in a lot of agreements. It frankly is a rewording of a force majeure clause, which basically says if they're unable to provide due to a natural disaster or unanticipated emergency such as war, rebellion, and other things, that they're not going to be able to provide. That's pretty standard stuff in most agreements. I suspect if that happens, it's going to be a area-wide issue, and it's not going to be just limited to the city of Cincinnati.
And we'll likely have bigger fish to fry then.
And we will likely have no water from anywhere. They will probably be bringing it in trucks with the National Guard, would be my guess. Yeah, you've seen the pictures from what happens in Europe and other places. 25 years, I think, you know, you can say it's a long period of time. We went through that with MSD, and we're still in an agreement that's now past 60 years on that. Well, not 60, it was 50, I think. It expired in 2019, I think, but it's been renewed since. But the bottom line on it is that our citizens need a source of drinking water, and right now that's the only one that's available.
And actually, if you remember back in the 70s, I think it was when we had the water shortage, it wasn't really a water shortage. It was actually a power shortage to waterworks. So it was more of a power shortage than what it was. It was the heat of the summer when they called it a water shortage. But that's what it was for, not water.
Any idea why Wyoming can still use their well field?
They're not getting that water out of the same aquifer.
I'm under the impression that it is the same aquifer.
Well, maybe in a location that's not polluted. They didn't have pristine.
Yeah.
Or General Electric.
Interesting. Can we get water from them?
Probably not enough.
Can we ask?
We would. We absolutely would. We'd ask everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Laughlin, Wyoming, absolutely.
City of Hamilton, I believe, runs their own water treatment system, water purification system. Anyway, that's the discussion, I think. So everybody,
I'll make a motion to
Speak.
suspend the second and third reading because this expires on December 31st.
Second.
roll call, please. Sorry, motion to suspend the rules requiring a second and third reading by Mrs. Edichico, second by Mr. Bishop. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Mr. Bronner.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Boehner.
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger.
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
7 yes, the suspension carries.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Ooh, that was a tough one, but I think it goes to Mr. Bronner this time. Motion by Mr. Bishop and a second by Mr. Bronner to adopt the ordinance. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Mr. Bronner.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Boehner.
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger.
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Ordinance carries. Ordinance number, please.
2022-36. Okay. An ordinance establishing rates of pay and benefits for certain full and part-time non-bargaining positions and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion on this one?
I'll make a motion to suspend the second and third readings.
I'll second.
Maybe suspend the rule requiring?
Yes, sir.
All right. So it was Mr. Bronner offering a motion to suspend the rule requiring a second, third reading, second by Mrs. Edichico. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
No.
Mr. Bronner,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
No.
Mr. Boehner,
No.
Mr. Tommen,
No.
Mrs. Kroger,
No.
and Mrs. Edichico.
Okay, we have 2 yes and 5 no. The motion does not carry. So this will be a first reading. Any others we don't know about? Are you good there? Enough reading for tonight? Okay. Miscellaneous business. I know Mrs. Edichico has a bunch. Go right ahead.
Not a bunch, just a quick comment. As I mentioned earlier, I would like to schedule a Laws and Contracts Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 29th at 6:30 PM here in council chambers, along with discussing the dispensary and location. Patrick and I did receive the first draft of the updated property maintenance codes from Paul Coulter, and I would like to review those during the meeting. I also received an update on some of the abandoned properties in the city from Dan Brooks. I'll make sure to send all this information out to my committee members beforehand.
Very good. Any
What time is
questions?
that committee meeting?
6:30 PM.
Right here
Yes, council chambers.
on the 29th, right?
Yes. That's 2 weeks.
Mr. Tom?
If I may, I just wanted to thank everyone that came out and supported the Hilltop renovation plan on Friday. It was an excellent turnout. I know the family was thrilled. They raised a good amount of money. There's still plenty to go, and they are in the process of planning new or future fundraisers, so please stay tuned for that. But thanks to everybody that came out and supported an excellent cause.
Was well attended for a rainy day. So,
Yeah.
Snowy day.
yeah.
Mr. Powell?
I just want to say, we recently lost my father-in-law, Norm Niehaus, and wanted to publicly thank the response that morning from the police and fire, and the response from the community ever since. So it's been really, really good to see, and he received excellent care that morning, so we definitely appreciate it. So.
Good man.
All right, any others, council?
Motion adjourn.
Well, here, can we do a few other things here?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, go
Do
ahead.
you want to retract your motion?
No, I'll retract it.
Okay.
You know, our fire department has their annual turkey disposal this Friday, Saturday night, starting at 7 PM at the Hay Field House. Please come out. You know, it's used for a multitude of things for our fire department. Our Girl Scouts will host a Christmas tree lighting and crib dedication on December 2nd at 6:30 PM at the corner of Reading Road and Benson, with Santa Claus hopefully appearing at Red Wine and Company following the tree lighting. Following that, we will have a Benson Street Walk where businesses will have booths, prizes. Again, that starts after 6:30. Benson Street will be closed. Market Street will remain open, so it'll be from the west side of Market Street to the east side of Jefferson. Jefferson will remain open, but businesses will have displays and things to do, and there will be a scavenger hunt
And food.
and food. Also, the Knights of St. John will have their annual ham raffle on December 10th and 11th, starting at 7 PM. Excellent turtle soup, excellent cause there. And our American Legion will host the Army-Navy football game on December 10th at 3 PM.
Very good. All right,
Motion adjourn.
motion to
Second.
adjourn by Mr. Boehner, second, was it Mrs. Kroger? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.